Let's now look at the specific areas of the Windows Autopilot process, where you may encounter problems that you'll need to troubleshoot. We can troubleshoot the Windows Autopilot into several different sections. These include the prerequisite tenant configuration stage, the Windows Autopilot configuration itself, connecting to the Internet, the out-of-box experience, or OOBE for the user, joining the device to Azure AD, and the final stage where Intune configures the device. Let's review each of these stages in a little bit more detail and highlight the troubleshooting areas that you should concentrate on. An administrator needs to configure Azure Active Directory and Microsoft Intune prior to deploying devices with Windows Autopilot. You should focus your troubleshooting on the following areas. Ensure that the MDM authority has been set to Intune. Check that the MDM discovery URL is correctly configured so that your devices can automatically locate the cloud-based MDM service. That users can join their devices to Azure AD and ensure that Azure AD custom branding has been completed, as this needs to be done for Autopilot to work. You also need to ensure that device hardware IDs have been successfully registered with the Windows Autopilot deployment service. Deployment profiles have been created and the correct type of deployment profile has been used. For example, if the device is a self-deploying kiosk, you also need to ensure the deployment profiles have devices assigned to them and that they show in the portal. Internet access is required for Windows Autopilot. If a device cannot connect to the Internet, then Windows Autopilot cannot validate if the device hardware ID has been registered with Autopilot. This is needed to ensure that the deployment of the device can be done by Windows Autopilot. Therefore, you should focus your troubleshooting in the following areas, ensuring that specific network requirements are met, including connecting to Wi-Fi or local network access. We view any firewall port settings and problems with DNS name resolution. Ensure that the correct version of Windows 10 has been used, such as version 1703 or later. The out-of-box experience draws upon the settings in the Windows Autopilot deployment profile. You should focus your troubleshooting on whether the device has received the correct deployment profile and that the assigned deployment profile settings are correct. For example, has administrator access been granted by accident? And finally, is enrollment status page assigned and being displayed? During the Autopilot setup process, Azure Active Directory will authenticate the user and join the device to Azure AD and then automatically enroll the device into Intune. You should focus your troubleshooting on ensuring that the user has an account within Azure AD. If the user cannot log in, check that they're using the correct credentials. Ensure that the user has not exceeded the maximum device limit quota in Azure AD. In the final stage of the Windows Autopilot process, the device will be enrolled into mobile device management. If MDM fails, then policies, settings, and apps will not be deployed to the device. You should focus your troubleshooting on the following areas. The enrollment status page, as this is useful as it can help you identify any MDM issues. Whether the user is missing licenses for any software that you're deploying, and you should build up your policies, settings, and deployments in phases and test each one, and finally review the logs to establish where failures occur. Let's now look at more advanced troubleshooting techniques which can be used to pinpoint which part of the Windows Autopilot process is failing. Before we get into the specifics, one of the most common issues I've encountered when troubleshooting the Windows Autopilot process is patience. Some of the background processes, such as the background assignment processing, can take several minutes to complete, and you cannot speed this up. Log files can be useful in identifying the specific causeway of a Windows Autopilot problem. For example, problems with profile settings and the OOBE are recorded in event log entries. You can review the log entries using the Windows Event Viewer. The logs are located in Application and Services Logs, Microsoft Windows Provisioning Diagnostics Provider, and then Autopilot. For example, a log entry might show that Autopilot policy name not found. The website on screen is an excellent resource for interpreting the events that may be recorded when using Windows Autopilot. You should know that the registry will also record Windows Autopilot successes and failures. The Autopilot deployment service sends information to the registry on the targeted device, and the information can then be used to troubleshoot problems. You'll find the registry entries in HKey local machine software, Microsoft Provisioning Diagnostics, and then Autopilot. An example of a problem recorded in the registry is that the device has not been registered with Autopilot. If you have a complex problem that you're struggling to resolve, you can use the Event Tracing for Windows tool. To use this feature, you'll need to enable recording using the Windows Performance Recorder tool, and then view the results using the Windows Performance Analyzer. Whenever a major issue occurs, error codes are generated by Windows. They can be viewed using the Event Trace for Windows tool. Error codes have a specific meaning, and therefore they can help you resolve issues. We can see some examples of Windows Autopilot error codes on screen. You'll find more information about your problem when reviewing error code descriptions as shown in the table on screen. For example, the first error code shows the device has a TPM chip. However, the TPM is an unsupported version, and therefore you'd need to upgrade the device to TPM 2.0 or later. The second error implies that the Azure AD configuration is a problem, and the third and fourth error codes provide only minimal information. Therefore, you'll need to investigate further by checking the log files, viewing registry entries, and by using the Event Tracing for Windows tool. Sometimes you may need additional help to resolve an issue. There are several ways to find help for Windows Autopilot. You can use the Docs Microsoft Online documentation, which includes Windows Autopilot FAQs, troubleshooting, and support information. You can contact Microsoft support to ask for help or open a support case for Autopilot. Remember, support is free for all Microsoft subscriptions, including Microsoft Intune. Let's drop onto our demo environment and troubleshoot Autopilot deployment profiles. Let's take a scenario where Windows Autopilot deployment has failed for an individual device. I know that the device was able to connect to the internet and the correct version of Windows 10 has been used. This means that the issue might be caused with the deployment profile problem. First, let's check the community branding is in place. In my Azure Active Directory Admin Center, under Manage, I'll select Company Branding. And notice that the default profile has been configured. Here I can see an image, a banner logo, and also logos in the advanced settings. Let's now head over to Intune and check that the MDM authority has been configured to Intune. I'm using Microsoft 365. Therefore, I'll open my Microsoft Endpoint Manager Admin Center. I'll select Tenant Administration. And here we can see that the MDM authority has been set to Intune. Let's now check that the device's hardware ID has been registered with the Autopilot service. I'll click Devices. Enroll Devices. And then Devices under the Windows Autopilot Deployment Program. Here we can see I have 3 machines. I'll open my file that contains the hardware ID. And here I can compare the device ID. It starts with 0889, which corresponds to this hardware ID. Therefore, we can confirm that the device has been successfully registered with the Windows Autopilot deployment service. Next, we need to check to see if the deployment profile has been created and the settings are correct. I'll select Deployment Profiles, and then review the Autopilot profile. Here we can see that the deployment mode is user-driven. Devices need to be Azure AD joined, and there's been 3 devices assigned to this profile. We can review the settings and edit them if necessary. We can also view the assigned devices, and here we can see the 0889 is the same device we saw earlier. If at any stage of this troubleshooting process you find incorrect settings which could have caused a Windows Autopilot deployment failure, you can amend the settings and then retry the deployment process.